Well, I guess I'll have to say something about this Breonna Taylor case now that everybody is weighed in on it but me. So here's the thing. This is one reason why I don't get into politics too much. I try not to get into politics a lot for this reason. Because there are three things really that really, actually I should say four. Four things really that really determine all politics, okay, in my opinion. There are the facts, both known, guessed, assumed, which may or may not be accurate in any case. And this brings me to Tucker Carlson and Fox News and President Trump's claims about how the news media is fake, all this stuff, okay? But facts. What are the facts? What is the set of known facts? What facts are known? What facts are not known? What facts are told to the public before and after decisions have been made? When are those facts made public? The facts. Okay. The other thing is logic. Okay. The third thing is, what do you want to see happen given what you know about the facts of the case? Okay. And the fourth thing is really, who is the defendant and who are the plaintiffs? Okay. And this all is like thrown together like a stew. Okay. The problem is that it's impossible to look, and this is what really irritates me about our quote unquote justice system and our quote unquote laws and our quote unquote fairness and blindness, all this stuff, is that it is so impossible for people to make a truly objective decision because they have so much at stake. It may not be you personally involved in this case, but everybody has an opinion. Everybody has a horse in a race. Everyone does. It's just not, it is impossible to not have a horse in a race when it comes to legal decision. Because you may think it affects you a little bit or it affects you a lot, every legal decision affects every one of us to some degree. So there is always a certain element of emotion, a certain element of self-interest, and a certain element of, let's just say, hypocrisy, okay, to just bring it all together. Like, the famous statement that I have heard about this so many times is the statement of "not in my backyard," okay? That I don't mind it if it happens in your backyard or in your part of the world or whatever, but as long as it doesn't happen in my backyard, not a problem, okay? Because the issue is that the first thing you really want to do in evaluating anything that happens in politics is you want to make sure it doesn't happen to you. You don't want this entire issue, you don't want to have anything to do with, okay? If it happens in New York City, that's fine. I live in Montana, I live in Michigan, I live in Minnesota. And the reason I live in one of these states is so I do not have to deal with what happens in New York. Okay? All around the world, people are saying, that's okay as long as it happens over there, but I don't want it to happen here. I moved here, I live here so that I don't have the same problems here that they have in New York City or Florida or California or Texas or whatever, okay? The next thing is they'll be saying, that doesn't happen here. When, of course it does. It just happened. And it's always been possible for it to happen. And in fact, their big issue is it's not so much that you're worried about it having happened. You're worried about it happening. Now that you know about it and you know the details. You don't want the same thing to happen in your neighborhood. So the issue that we have to accept is that there's a whole 200 feet of emotion and questions about accuracy, questions about the facts and so forth before we get to the logic of it. And the logic of it is most people are just not logical. And second, their logic is always biased. It's always biased by self-interest. The most anyone can say is that that's what they want to happen. That's what they want to believe. Okay, because we're just not robots programmed to believe anything logical. And even if we were, we'd still have to deal with emotional influence in whoever wrote the code. It's just that simple. Now we've gotten to a point where Democrats don't trust Republicans. Republicans don't trust Democrats. We talk about power and authority before we talk about right and wrong, before we talk about truth and justice and facts and logic, because people refuse to believe that the other side of the aisle can be honest and can be logical about something. So, and it all depends on your value system also. So the reason I hate talking about politics so much is that because so many times things are just filtered through this inevitable wave of emotion. And I just don't want to get into an emotional argument with people about legal issues. But in this case, I'm going to make an exception. And I'll tell you why I'm going to make an exception. Because this case, the Breonna Taylor case, is so fundamental to our system of law and order. It brings out a number of important factors that people are either overlooking or not considering it because they're so tied up in this whole race issue. It's black people upset about somebody getting killed and they want to have changes made, and another situation where blacks are whining, blah blah blah. Or that's a big factor. I think there's a huge factor in this country where people just want to dismiss what blacks say because blacks are saying it. I don't want to do what they want just because they're black people. If they were white people, they'd be all over it maybe. But for blacks, there's this instant no, it's not going to happen. Okay, we're not going to do anything just because blacks want it. But in this case, there are some important factors that we need to consider as a country. Whether you're a southern redneck or a northwestern liberal tree hugger or an East Coast establishment capitalist, whatever, okay, there are serious issues here. The first thing is that this woman was in her own house, in her own apartment, flat, whatever, in bed with her boyfriend in their house. Now, if there's one thing that the Supreme Court and the criminal justice system in the United States has declared as a sanctified location, a holy location in the lives of American citizens, it is their home. We can all agree on that. Everyone in this country sees their home as their castle. Okay? The problem is that the police have to be granted an exception to go in and enforce the law or carry out a warrant or whatever it is. No knock, warrant, search, search in the sense of suspicious behavior. They are granted an exception to this concept in order to enforce the law and protect the privacy, the safety and security of the public, and to ensure the health of the union. Okay? This ensure the effective government. Okay? So we have a situation where 99.999% of the people in this country would say that for the boyfriend to have a gun in the house and open fire on somebody who had come into the house unannounced without their permission, half of this country would say that makes perfect sense. Okay? Would fight for that up and down the street, for that right. In fact, they owned several handguns and several medium length weapons and so forth for home defense. For this reason, the Supreme Court itself has routinely reinforced the right of homeowners and residents to use lethal force in their own home when anyone comes into the home who is not a resident of the home, not a legal resident of the home. And so this is one of those areas where we have a conflict between personal rights and freedom and self-defense and the government's authority to regulate the public and enforce the law and to provide for the general safety and security of the public. Now, there's no way around this, okay? People are saying the cops knocked, they had a warrant. People are saying the boyfriend should not have shot a cop. He shot a cop. What did you expect with the police to return fire? You know, people are saying all these things which are really side issues to the real issue. The real issue is it doesn't matter if the cops knocked first before they entered forcibly this woman's domicile. What matters is that she wasn't aware of who they were before they entered. That the boyfriend wasn't aware of who they were before they entered. It doesn't matter if 11 out of 12 or 1 out of 12 or whatever of the apartment building residents heard the cops announce themselves as cops before they burst into this woman's apartment. What matters is that the residents didn't know that they were cops. Okay? The residents in the apartment are the ones who are supposed to be the ones who grant permission to enter the apartment. The residents, not the neighbors, not the police. Short of having a sense of suspicion that a crime was in the process of being committed. And it does open the question of whether or not we can serve warrants in this country in a case where the homeowner or the resident or the subject of the warrant is at home asleep. Okay? If you have a warrant out on you and you're in your bed asleep, does that empower the police to break into your house and arrest you? Does it? Now, I'm not going to deny that it's important that people don't think that they can be sheltered from the law sitting in their own house, okay? But they definitely should be sheltered from unannounced entry in their own house, okay? I think that's a compromise we all have to make, that the cops should have made some effort, serious effort, to announce themselves before they entered the house to the point where it was not credible that somebody in the apartment wouldn't have heard them say they were cops. Not down the street, not down the hall, but in that apartment. Okay, if they were dead drunk, out on drugs, knocked out or whatever, that's a different story. Yeah, we can all assume that there's conditions or situations in which they wouldn't have heard the police, no matter how consistent or loud or intrusive they were in their announcements. But if they're just sleeping in bed, seriously, how much do they have to knock and how much noise do they have to make before their entry into the room becomes allowed? And in any case, if there's one person in that room who's under a warrant, whatever, and maybe he's wanted for murder, maybe he's wanted for shooting at cops, maybe who knows what, maybe he's wanted for a bomb plot or something like that. But what about the other people living there who aren't? Who are perfectly legitimate, law-abiding people? Are you just going to assume that they're collateral damage? So there's a real issue here that people are kind of missing in the overall sense. This isn't about blacks and cops. This isn't about a black man shooting a cop. This isn't about a homeowner who harbored a criminal, possibly. It isn't even about a wrong address. Okay, this is a simple issue of where do we draw the line and say it's okay for the police to break into somebody's house and use lethal force against a resident who's using lethal force in their own home to defend themselves and their family against an unknown person entering their house? Did the guy know that they were cops that he was shooting at? This is the question you really have to ask. Would the guy have shot at these cops if he had known they were cops? Would he? Now, if they had announced themselves as cops and then the guy just said, "Fuck you, cops, fuck you up," and opened fire on them, that would be a different story. But there's no evidence that happened. The only evidence that I'm hearing about, and I'm hearing this in the media, just like the rest of you, whether it's fake media or not, but I'm hearing this. The only evidence there really is in this case that we have is that the police entered the residence. The boyfriend opened fire on who entered the building, not knowing, that I know as best I know, not knowing who it was, just opened fire in self-defense, which a large number of people in this country would say is completely justified, okay? And a large number of people would say, well, that's why you shouldn't have rely on a gun for self-defense, and you'll go into that argument all day long, whether or not it was right for him to shoot at these unknown people entering his room or not. You can argue that all day long. But the fact that they're cops does not give them an exception to this issue. That just makes it even more of a problem, because now the police are either legally entering the residence or they're illegally entering the residence. Okay, that's the problem right there. Now, if he did not know they were cops and shot at them, that's his right. I don't think anybody would deny that. That's his right to do that. He has every right to fire at unknown assailants entering his house, entering his residence. Every right to do that, as long as it's legal for him to have a firearm in the first place. And even that's questionable, because if there's one good reason for felons and other criminals who right now are banned from owning handguns, it is home defense. That is their primary justification for having a firearm on their person in their house. Okay, which we all have the right to self-defense in our homes, defending our family. The other issue is what determines whether it's a legal or illegal entry. And if it is an illegal entry, how do the cops ever justify shooting him if it's not a legal entry? Now, is it a legal entry? If it is a legal entry, how do the police justify shooting at residents in the house in their self-defense when they are the ones who breached the perimeter of that house? Even if it was a legal entry, even if it was, how do you justify firing almost blindly at people in a dark room at night or whatever, late at night, under such circumstances? How is your first response when somebody opens fire on you to just start firing at the sound where the guy's sitting there next to the girlfriend in bed? You don't know who you're shooting at. You don't know what you're hitting. You don't know who else is in the line of fire. How is that legal? Okay? We cannot just say, just because the police were shot at, it's okay for them to open fire at whoever they think is shooting at them. When they can't see anything, they don't know anything, they don't know what's going on. Maybe it's a hostage situation. They don't know what's going on. You can't just isolate this and say it was the boyfriend versus the police in a legal entry situation. It doesn't matter whether it was the right address or the wrong address. What matters is the cops' first response back to the line of fire was to open fire. And they hit, not the boyfriend, they hit this woman multiple times. The 3 officers firing. There's the shots that go through the wall. The guy just blindly starts shooting. He's blindly shooting in the apartment, and his shots go into the next apartment. That's how blindly he was shooting. And the other 2 cops are shooting poorly enough where they, number one, don't hit the guy shooting at them, and number 2, they hit somebody who's just sitting there and lying in bed. So they obviously are not targeting. They're not firing under control. So how do you justify not charging him with manslaughter? It's at least negligent manslaughter, at the very least. If the defense is, well, somebody started shooting at us, so we started shooting back, and if we hit 15 people and not the person who was shooting at us, well, I guess that's not our fault because we were being shot at. How many people have to get hit and die, or almost get hit, okay, before that doesn't hold any water anymore, okay? What we're seeing in this case is that, well, if one person gets killed, gets riddled, okay, that's not our fault. We're not in the wrong in any way. Nothing we did there was wrong. Now, if you start off with that assumption, as opposed to saying, we might have hit somebody by shooting back at this guy when we couldn't see who we were shooting at, or what was in the room or whatever, when somebody else might have been hit, okay? If you're not going to start there, if you're going to start with the assumption that we shot this woman who was unarmed 6 times, and that is not even a chargeable action, then what's the line where it is? 2, 3, 5, 50, 5,000 people? Where is the line where that suddenly becomes a criminal offense? That's the real problem here. We are whitewashing this incident because shots were fired at the cops. Yes, well, again, did the guy know they were cops that he was shooting at? Did the cops announce themselves clearly to this person firing at them to the point where he knew that they were cops? If you don't know the answer to these questions, then the questions are not well answered. And if they're not well answered, then there's negligence. There's blatant negligence. The problem is we don't want to burden the police, so we're going to allow them to vapor people, innocent people, because we want to give the cops the benefit of not having to worry about it if they end up opening fire when they do a break-in and search, or a break-in and serve a warrant. We are saying to ourselves that in this case, we're going to give the cops the benefit of the doubt. Okay, we're not even going to charge them. We're going to say it's okay. Let me ask you a simple question. If the woman was white, if this was a white household, if people in a white neighborhood had to deal with this problem, what would the results be? And it wouldn't happen. And you know why it wouldn't happen? Because the cops would not do this. They just wouldn't do it. Okay? They would walk into that room, and until they could see who they were shooting at, who was shooting at them, until they could clearly identify a target, they would not fire a shot. For this very reason. Okay? You do not go into a darkened room at night without the permission of the homeowner, unless you have a clear issue of safety, clear that you can see with your eyes, a clear issue of safety for somebody in the residence, and start shooting. It doesn't matter whether they're shooting at you or not. You're not going to take those shots. You're just not going to, because you can't tell whether the person that you're shooting is a victim or the criminal, or young or old or armed or not armed, and most of all, white or black. And this is the whole problem. So what this is telling me is that somehow, somewhere, in some way, race played a part in this entire action. Somehow. Okay? That I will bet you, if you were to look on that warrant somewhere, it would say black male, blah, blah, blah. Okay? And given that situation, it's black male. Oh, okay. It's live fire. It's a live fire exercise. If it had said white male, if it had said, in an upscale neighborhood, if it had said in even a moderately mixed neighborhood where there's a chance that the person, could have been white, or a chance that a white person could be shot, no, it wouldn't happen. When the officers are almost entirely sure that white people are not involved, the guns come out, the bullets start flying. This, I can't guarantee you, is the truth. But I'm highly suspicious that it is. And that's the important part that we have to remember about this case, is that we want to judge it one way versus another, partially because the victims and the shooter inside the house were not white. But if they were white, or there's a good chance that they might have been, we would want it the other way.